I, 35M, built my company from absolute zero, and my family tried to sell it right out from under me to make my spoiled, golden child sister the CEO figurehead. Sounds like a plot from some daytime drama. But no, this is my real life, and it's been one of the most painful wake-up calls I've ever endured. Let me start at the beginning. I was born and raised in a small town in Pennsylvania, the first child of what most would call a typical American family. My dad was a high school history teacher. My mom worked part-time at a local bakery. We had a modest house, one car, and lots of Sunday church outings. On paper, we were just fine. But in reality, everything revolved around my younger sister Emily, 31F. She was the golden one from the start, bubbly, cute, effortlessly likable. Every teacher adored her. Every family friend cooed over her. My parents acted like she was a unicorn in a world of horses. I, on the other hand, was too serious, too quiet, and often told to let your sister shine for once. By high school, the difference in how we were treated was glaring. Emily could flunk a test, and Mom would say the teacher didn't explain well. I'd bring home a B+ and get grounded for slacking off. She got a car at 16. I rode a bike until college. Still, I kept my head down. I studied hard, got into a decent state university on a scholarship, and worked 2 jobs to support myself. I was determined to make something of myself, not to win their approval anymore, but for me. It was during my junior year that I discovered coding. A roommate introduced me to Python, and I got addicted. I began building small apps in my dorm room, selling freelance tools to local businesses. When I graduated, I skipped grad school and moved to Austin with $1,800, no job, and 1 backpack. For 2 years, I lived like a ghost, sleeping on couches, freelancing on Fiverr, picking up side gigs just to eat. It was brutal, but I was building something. By 26, I launched my startup, Nest. It was rough, scrappy, unpolished, a cloud optimization tool for medium-sized businesses. I poured everything into it. My friends were going to weddings, taking vacations. I was up at 3 a.m. troubleshooting bugs with international clients. No one from my family ever visited, not once. Calls were brief, mostly passive-aggressive. My mom always asked if I'd found a real job yet. Emily, who failed out of college after 2 years of partying, was busy posting Instagram influencer content and taking trips funded by our parents. I got my first seed funding at 29. By 32, Nest was valued at $15 million. Last year, we crossed $80 million in projected annual revenue. And that's when the leeches came crawling out of the woodwork. Suddenly, I started getting texts from my dad asking if we could grab lunch and catch up. My mom sent me homemade cookies like we were close. Emily tagged me in some post about being proud of her big bro's hustle. It was awkward, but I wanted to believe it. I'd been alone so long that even a small scrap of validation felt like a warm meal. I made a mistake. I let them in. I invited Emily to a few investor dinners. She was charming, photogenic, good at small talk. I'll give her that. She made some people laugh, brought energy to the table. I thought, maybe there's room for her in branding or PR. I offered her a soft, creative consultant title. It was mostly fluff, but she ran with it. I didn't see the storm coming. 3 months ago, I was blindsided. A board member, one of my earliest supporters, sent me an urgent message. He had been approached privately by my parents and Emily. They were proposing to sell a massive 40% equity stake in Nest to a strategic media firm in New York, one that Emily had strong ties to. As part of the deal, she would become the new public CEO. I'd be relieved of executive duties and offered a founder emeritus role, basically a desk in a corner while she ran my company. Their reason: Emily has better media instincts and Jordan me lacks the charisma for scale. My parents told the investor I was a technical genius but socially unfit for leadership. They said all of this behind my back. I was humiliated. I confronted my parents and Emily in person. At a dinner, they invited me to under the guise of celebrating my success. When I brought up the deal, they didn't deny it. My mother looked me in the eyes and said, "You've always been a builder, Jordan. But now it's time for Emily to take it further. She understands people. My father nodded like this was some logical evolution of events. Emily just smiled smugly, like she was already sitting in my chair. I lost it. Not physically, but I walked out and never looked back. Over the next 48 hours, I revoked Emily's internal credentials, shut down her access, informed the board, and changed the security protocols. My COO, my best friend from college, stood by me. We issued a private internal statement clarifying that no equity sale had been proposed nor would be entertained. That's when the media campaign started. Emily started posting cryptic TikToks and Instagram stories. Stuff like, misogyny in tech is alive and well, and when they're afraid of your potential, they try to bury you. She even did an anonymous interview on a podcast painting herself as a silenced woman in a male-dominated industry. I stayed quiet publicly, but internally I started getting concerned. The team was confused. Rumors were spreading. Some clients were anxious. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was business sabotage. And for what? Because I didn't hand over the empire I bled for to my sister, who never so much as answered a client email. Because I didn't let my family play house in a company they mocked me for creating. I never wanted to believe blood could turn on you for money. But here I am, standing alone, watching my own parents side with my sister in trying to gut everything I've built. And somehow, they still think I'm the ungrateful one. I don't know where this ends, but I'll die before I hand over my life's work to a family who never saw my worth until it had a price tag. Not again. Never again. The fallout was nuclear. I thought cutting off Emily's access and locking her out of the company systems would send a message. A boundary. But instead, it detonated a war I wasn't prepared for. I'd anticipated petty tantrums or maybe a few passive-aggressive texts from my parents. What I wasn't ready for was the tidal wave of venom unleashed within hours. It started at 4:16 a.m. My phone buzzed endlessly with Slack notifications, tagged emails, Google alerts, Twitter mentions. I groggily opened my laptop, and my stomach sank. Trustpilot, Glassdoor, Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. My company was being dragged. Anonymous reviews flooded in, alleging everything from hostile workplace culture to gender discrimination. They used carefully crafted language, just vague enough to avoid slander, just sharp enough to wound. Emily's podcast clip was circulating everywhere, a dramatic retelling of how she was silently removed from her position for challenging the old-school, male-dominated tech mindset. She even teared up in the audio. Crocodile. Tears. The most liked comment under her viral LinkedIn post read, "It's always the quiet, competent women who get pushed out by insecure men." She was trending. She was trending. The internet had crowned her a feminist icon overnight, a digital Joan of Arc in a startup war. Meanwhile, I was cast as the heartless, power-hungry CEO who had tossed his sister aside to preserve his ego. My company's social media manager called me sobbing. She didn't know how to handle the onslaught. The inbox was full of hate mail, boycott threats, even a few death wishes. Yes, death wishes. People were calling for my resignation based solely on Emily's vague storytelling and a few carefully planted anonymous testimonials that I'm 99% sure she wrote herself. I tried to stay calm, but internally I was spiraling. Years of sleepless nights, living off vending machine granola bars, taking cold showers in co-working spaces, borrowing money to pay rent. All that was being erased in the public eye by a few manipulative posts from someone who once cried over a broken nail before a dinner date. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the letter arrived. A courier rang my doorbell that evening and handed me an envelope. Cream-colored. My name in blue ink, written in my mother's delicate handwriting. My heart jumped for a second. Some part of me still stupidly hoped it might be an apology. Peace offering. Something human. But no. It was a loaded, handwritten betrayal. 3 pages of self-righteous guilt-tripping and finger-pointing. My mother claimed I had embarrassed the family by treating Emily like an employee instead of a sister. My father chimed in with the line that still echoes in my head. Emily is the heart of this family. You may be the brain, but without the heart, the brain is useless. What kind of parent writes that to their son? But the real punch came at the end. Carefully worded, like they'd rehearsed it. We are prepared to pursue legal counsel to ensure Emily is fairly compensated for her efforts and contributions to Date Nest, especially considering her emotional distress and reputational damages. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I laughed again. Legal action? Emotional distress? For a consultant title I handed her out of pity? The pain was too sharp to even get angry at first. I felt like I was being stabbed by people I once trusted to protect me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategic. They hadn't simply turned on me, they had choreographed it. Together. The next morning, I walked into the office and stared at my team, many of whom looked unsure of what to believe. The poison was spreading. Silence would only let it grow. I called an emergency all-hands meeting. I explained what had happened. I didn't trash-talk Emily, I gave facts. I showed timelines, shared internal documents, clarified her role, her title, the non-binding nature of her so-called partnership. I apologized for the confusion, but I didn't apologize for standing my ground. Then, I called in our legal team and said the one thing I never thought I'd say out loud. Prepare for litigation if they want war. That night, I returned to my apartment, poured a glass of bourbon, and sat in the dark. No music, no TV, just me and the storm I never asked for. I kept staring at a family photo on my shelf from 15 years ago. Christmas 2009. All of us in ugly sweaters, Emily hugging me from behind. I looked happy in that photo. Now, I wouldn't let any of them near my front door. I used to think that when I became successful, I'd finally make them proud. That maybe they'd understand why I worked so hard. Instead, they saw dollar signs. They saw an empire they didn't build and wanted to cut it up like cake. They think they've broken me, but they've only burned the last bridge I was still trying to protect. From here on, I fight not just to save my company. I fight to make sure I never let them near what I built again. Everything burned faster than I could rebuild. I had just begun shoveling dirt out of one fire when another started behind me. The smear campaign, Emily's viral victim arc, my parents threatening legal action over my own company. It was chaos. But somehow, I still thought I had a few good people in my corner. That tiny, naive part of me clung to the hope that not everyone I loved would turn into a traitor. Then the leak happened, and with it, that final shred of hope evaporated. It was a Friday, late evening. The office had cleared out. I was finishing a review of our quarterly forecasts when my internal security lead, Carla, knocked on the glass wall of my office. She never knocked. Her face was pale, jaw locked. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. She placed a printed document in front of me, a Reddit thread. Not just any thread. One with thousands of upvotes and hundreds of comments, dissecting my company's internal operations. Screenshots of confidential legal discussions. Snippets of team communications. One particularly damning excerpt suggesting we were plotting a smear strategy against Emily, taken out of context surgically to make me look like a vindictive, power-obsessed tyrant. "This was leaked," she said. "We traced the metadata. I didn't ask who. Couldn't. Not until she confirmed it. It came from Nate's account. He pulled the file during your board prep meeting Tuesday night. Uploaded it via a remote proxy that tried to spoof a public IP. But he wasn't careful. Everything inside me stilled. Time slowed. Nate, 12 years. 12 goddamn years. We started out in a garage, literally. Sleeping on yoga mats next to our laptops, dreaming of IPOs and Forbes features. He saw me through the worst. Ramen dinners, silent breakdowns. Even the day I found out my ex-fiancée cheated on me in college. And now he'd betrayed me for her. I summoned him to my office. I wish I could say I yelled, cursed, punched something. But I didn't. I just stared at him, hands folded, my voice quiet like a storm right before it breaks. "Why?" I asked. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "You've changed," he said casually, as if we were debating a restaurant menu. "You've lost your soul. You forgot why we started this." Emily, she reminded me. Emily reminded him. The woman who joined our company 4 years after it existed? Who never showed up to a single late-night pitch meeting or back-end test sprint. You were supposed to be my brother, I said. I was, he said, until you turned into your own villain. That was all I needed. I fired him then and there. No ceremony. No second chances. He walked out with his office box and a smug smirk, like he believed he'd just saved something righteous. I hope he remembers that expression when the truth comes out, because it will. The same night, the universe gave me a strange, quiet gift. Jordan, barely noticeable, quiet, focused, stayed late every Friday to clean up campaign data. She had worked under Emily during her brief creative visionary consultant phase. I never thought much of her, not because she wasn't smart, but because she never inserted herself in the drama. But she had been watching, listening. Her email arrived at 2:03 a.m. Subject: about Emily's little war. Attached were screen recordings, voice memos, proof. Emily on a Zoom call, drink in hand, laughing about how gullible the internet was, how easy it was to play the oppression card, how she was never going to work in tech anyway, but would milk the attention and launch a book deal. One part still echoes in my head. He thinks this is about the company. I couldn't care less about his stupid app. I just want him humiliated, like he made me feel invisible all my life. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't about feminism or family or fairness. It was revenge. Cold. Manufactured. Broadcasted through ring lights and microphones to an army of people who wanted a cause to rage about. I wanted to scream, cry, break things. Instead, I forwarded the files to my attorney and whispered just 3 words into my phone. Prepare the lawsuit, but not a quiet one. I wanted this public. A defamation suit with full disclosure. I wanted every lie exposed. Every anonymous tip tied to a real name. I wanted the influencers and Reddit threads to see who they'd been defending. I wanted the public to see that I wasn't the monster. I was the mark. And while that was being prepped, I made another move. I launched a shell corporation, Ioniscore, a new startup built quietly, using the skeleton of my existing infrastructure. Clean, untouched. I began hiring discreetly, building the future outside of the poisoned walls of my old company. I still owned the majority shares in the original, but now I was setting up something they couldn't touch. Not Emily, not Nate, not even my parents. Speaking of them, they called. Finally, Mom sobbed. Dad tried the whole "we're still your family" pitch. Said they had no idea Emily was planning to attack the company. That they only wanted what was fair. That they were caught in the middle. I told them they could stay there, in the middle, because I was moving forward. Alone. I ended the call before they could twist the blade again. As I sat in my apartment that night, bourbon in hand, the city lights below, a strange calm settled over me. I had nothing left to lose now. The public hated me. My sister wanted me erased. My best friend stabbed me. My parents were complicit. But I had something they didn't. Proof, power, and the will to fight. Let them come. They lit the fire. Now I'll build the empire that burns their lies down to ash. When I say I walked into that courtroom like a man going into battle, I'm not exaggerating. I had on the suit I wore the day I signed my first investor contract. Not for luck, but as a reminder of who I used to be before all of this. Before the bloodbath. Before family turned into predators and my marriage became a hostage situation. Emily sat across from me, decked in designer grief, flanked by a polished team of lawyers funded by the very money she siphoned out of my company. Her smugness had matured, like wine or rot. She didn't even glance at me when I walked in. But I saw them, my parents, sitting behind her. Mom had her hands folded like she was attending church. Dad looked tense, aged, but still silent. Neither one looked at me, not even once. The people who raised me, now seated behind the woman who tried to ruin me. The trial began with Emily's team throwing everything they had: emotional manipulation, falsified texts, taken wildly out of context, exaggerated stories about how she mentored early employees and nurtured the brand's vision. I had to listen to my life's work be painted as a shared dream she had helped build from the ground up. But then my lawyer, Lucas, rose. Let me tell you something about Lucas. The man doesn't raise his voice. He dissects you with quiet questions. And by the end of his first cross-examination, the jury knew something was off. The cracks started showing when he pulled up financial records Emily had tried to conceal, off the books, consulting fees paid to her influencer friends, vacations disguised as brand retreats, and an entire apartment rental listed under the company card. That was just the beginning. Lucas then brought in a forensic accountant. Emily's financial trail was a mess of shell payments, forged approvals, she'd copied my signature in some, and misappropriated funds that tied directly to her and, here's the kicker, my mother. Turns out Mom had been helping Emily launder company funds to avoid the paper trail looking suspicious. In exchange, Emily had promised her a 10% stake in the company once I was removed. My mother, the woman who once cried at my college graduation because she was so proud, was negotiating my corporate assassination behind my back. But it wasn't just my mother. Lucas dropped recorded calls. I'll never forget the sound of my father's voice, telling Emily, once he's out of the way, we make sure it's handed over to someone who actually knows what they're doing, like you or your kids. He's too selfish to see that it belongs to all of us. That someone? My sister's son, the new golden child, barely 18, who knew nothing about tech, startups, or management. Just another pawn in their little empire-building fantasy. The courtroom was silent when the recordings ended. Emily's face drained of color. My parents, I don't even know if they blinked. They didn't speak, didn't move, but I saw something crack in them, like they'd finally realized they were no longer in control of the narrative. Lucas turned to the jury and delivered the final blow. You don't have to like my client. You don't have to think he's perfect. But what you've seen today is the truth. A man betrayed by the very people who claimed to love him, who built something extraordinary only to have it cannibalized by the people closest to him. We won the civil case. Emily was ordered to repay over $2.3 million in misused funds and relinquish any claims to company equity. The court referred the laundering evidence to federal prosecutors for investigation. My parents? Still under review. But the damage wasn't just legal. The press had a field day. Headlines read like thriller novel titles. Startup queen falls from grace. Wife-mother duo accused of corporate theft. Golden family turns to ashes. Suddenly, everyone who once called Emily a visionary wanted nothing to do with her. Influencers distanced themselves. Sponsors cut ties. She became a pariah in the space she used to dominate. But none of that felt good. Because here's the part no one tells you. Even when you win, betrayal leaves scars. Even when justice is served, you still carry the wreckage. I had watched my own mother plan my downfall. My father cheer it on. My wife weaponized my dreams. And now I had to figure out who I was without them. Winning in court didn't mean peace. If anything, it left behind a strange, bitter silence. The day after the verdict, I stood outside my parents' house. Not to confront them, but to see if I could make peace with the fact that I no longer had parents. The lights were off, curtains drawn, like they were hiding from the shame they'd created. Or maybe just hiding from the truth they had no defense for. I didn't knock. I didn't want to hear their justifications. I didn't need to. I turned and walked away. But the past wasn't done with me yet. A week later I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. It was from my sister. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. We'd always had a strained relationship. She was the family's second golden child, trailing just behind the miracle of Emily. We were never enemies. But she made it clear long ago that she wasn't interested in competing with me. Her letter started with 3 words I never expected to read. I'm so sorry. She told me everything. She had no idea my parents were funneling funds to Emily. No idea they'd agreed to make her son the heir of my company. She thought they were just helping Emily navigate a divorce and protect the family image. She only learned the truth when Emily drunkenly boasted at a private dinner that once my company was fully wrestled from the robot's claws. Meaning me? Her nephew would get a corner office and a company card. My sister wrote that her stomach turned when she realized that Emily had no interest in legacy, only power. Then she dropped something that stopped my breath. I know you've been trying to rebuild your company, but there's something you need to know. Dad is planning to sell off parts of your original infrastructure. He kept the server contracts in his name. They're trying to sabotage the rebuild. That was when I felt the ice in my veins. I logged into the legacy admin system, the original tech platform I'd built my company on, back when it was just me, 2 friends, and a dream. And she was right. There were termination requests set for the end of the month. Hidden under old logins, quiet back-end protocols I hadn't thought about in years. They were trying to erase my foundation. I moved fast. I brought in Lucas again. We issued a cease and desist against my father and launched a counterclaim for property theft and unlawful business interference. By that time, my father's credibility was already crumbling under the civil suit exposure. And this was the final nail in the coffin. The courts ordered a full asset freeze on anything tied to my original company IP. But here's the moment that broke me more than anything. At the emergency hearing, my father stood up, looked me in the eye, and said, "You were never supposed to have all of this. You were just a stubborn boy with a laptop. We made you." I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. But something inside me quietly snapped. Because he was right about one thing. I was just a stubborn boy with a laptop once. But everything I became in spite of them. And I would become more. Without them, the rebuild continued. My company, Ionis Core, was now public knowledge. Our beta release went live. The new investors came in like waves. Journalists started changing their tone. "Come back, King." Some of them called me. Others said I was the man Silicon Valley tried to erase. But the best moment came quietly. In my email inbox. From my sister. "I left them. I'm done with the lies. I want to help you rebuild. If you'll let me." I haven't replied yet. I want to believe she's different. I want to believe blood isn't always poison. But for now, I'm watching everything, everyone, closely. Because I'm not just rebuilding a company. I'm building a legacy that no one will ever steal again. By the time the dust settled from the second court victory, my name had transformed from a whisper of scandal to a roar of vindication. TechCrunch called me the man who resurrected himself from corporate ash. Forbes did a profile titled, "From Orphaned by Betrayal to CEO Titan." Even my old college featured me in their alumni magazine with a quote I didn't remember saying, "Loyalty is expensive, but betrayal costs everything." Suddenly, people who once ghosted me were showing up in droves. VC firms that blacklisted me during the Emily scandal sent gift baskets. Some influencers who had smeared me in Emily's favor suddenly acted like we were lifelong friends. I wasn't bitter. I was amused. But amid the circus, I got a phone call I never expected. It was Mr. Stellan, my high school computer science teacher. A soft-spoken man with thick glasses and a deep, kind voice. "I've been following everything, son," he said. "You always had the heart of a builder. But the world can be cruel to builders." Then he paused. "There's something you need to know. Something about your parents and the company." My blood ran cold. He told me that my father didn't just steal ownership of the servers. He had been orchestrating deals behind my back for years. It turns out, my dad had siphoned off early-stage intellectual property from my first prototype when I was still in college. He'd used it in a dummy shell project with some obscure firm in Texas. When that firm was acquired by a conglomerate, my dad pocketed the buyout, telling my mom it was a family investment success. I checked. The shell firm existed, and its product was eerily similar to the early engine I'd built for Ionis. That wasn't all. Mr. Stellan admitted that years ago, my dad pressured him to fail me in one of my CS courses, hoping it would slow me down. Said I was getting too obsessed with the digital world. Mr. Stellan refused, of course, but it explained a lot of the passive-aggressive tension I remembered from my final year. It wasn't just betrayal. It was sabotage seeded early. That same week, a reporter sent me a draft of an exposé. The headline read, "Family of fallen tech star may have planned his downfall from day one." She had recordings, financial trails, even an ex-employee of my father's who spoke off the record. I gave the green light to publish it. When the story hit, it broke the internet. My mother and father were publicly disgraced. Whatever sympathy Emily had left vanished. My parents tried to release a video from their living room couch, claiming, "We only ever wanted what was best for our son." But the internet doesn't forget, and it definitely doesn't forgive. The real twist? My sister released a video on LinkedIn, distancing herself from the entire scandal. She confirmed the story, revealed she'd reported the shell company to authorities, and announced she was joining Ioniscore as Chief Ethics Officer. It exploded online. The redemption arc no one saw coming. I had mixed feelings, of course, but I couldn't deny she took the leap. Burned the last bridge to that poisonous past. Later that night, I sat in the penthouse I now owned. Far from the tiny garage where I first coded. Far from the guest room where I overheard Emily call me a stupid dreamer with control issues. And as I scrolled through messages from thousands of people who felt inspired by my story, people recovering from toxic families, stolen ideas, betrayed trust, I realized something. I didn't just get my company back. I got myself back. There's still one update left. One final chapter one didn't expect. Let me know when you're ready, because it involves a grave, a letter, and a stranger who changed everything. About 2 weeks after the exposé dropped and my sister's video went viral, I received a letter. A physical one again. But this one wasn't written in familiar handwriting. It came from a law firm in Missouri. The envelope was heavy. Inside was a short note and a set of documents. The note read, "To the rightful owner of what should have never been taken from him. I wasn't brave enough to come forward in life, but maybe this truth will give you some peace in death. I'm sorry. D. Avery." That name meant nothing to me, but the attached papers did. They were transfer documents dated over 18 years ago. Documents that confirmed that I had, in fact, been listed as the original owner of the patent that powered the core infrastructure of what would become my company. The same infrastructure that was licensed to that shell company in Texas illegally. Someone had falsified the transfer. And the final document? A hand-signed affidavit by someone named Derek Avery, a former business partner of my father. He had terminal cancer, and in a late attempt at atonement, he wanted to die with a clear conscience. He confirmed that my father coerced him into altering my patent registration, listing himself as co-inventor. I've been 19, still too trusting. He said he'd always felt guilty but feared my father's reach and wealth. Now, with this confession and documentation, I had every legal right to sue for damages. I could go after everything. Past profits, every cent that company made, even clawbacks from the Texas firm that had long since moved on. But strangely, I didn't feel angry. I felt a hollow. I took a long drive that night, up the coast. No music, no phone, just the hum of the tires and the crash of the Pacific beside me. I kept thinking about my mother, about the soft way she used to run her fingers through my hair when I had nightmares, about how that same woman would later try to auction off the pieces of my soul to secure a golden future for a daughter who couldn't stand on her own. I stopped at a small coastal cemetery near Santa Rosa. That's where Mr. Avery was buried. Quiet plot. No headstone yet. Just a wooden stake with a handwritten nameplate. I stood there for a long time, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, I whispered, "I forgive you." Not for him. For me. Because even though I could wage war forever, at some point I needed to stop fighting ghosts. I returned home, called my legal team, told them not to pursue further damages. We had the documents on file, to keep them, but I wouldn't burn more years chasing what I already regained. My future was no longer for revenge. It was for building. 3 months later, Ioniscore launched its first full platform, a hybrid AI data integrator system. It exploded in popularity. Investors flooded in. I stood on the NASDAQ stage with my rebuilt team, the ones who stayed, the ones who believed, and yes, my sister beside me. We rang the opening bell, and in that moment I realized I had lost everything a man could lose. Family, marriage, legacy, even belief in myself. And still I had risen, not in spite of the pain, But through it, they betrayed me, but I rebuilt without them. And now I'm the kind of man they can never break again. Thank you for stepping into another tale with me. Every story unlocks a different world, and I'm glad you were here for the journey. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my stories Unchained, where every ending is just the beginning of another adventure. Until next time, keep your mind open and your heart ready for the next story, Unchained.